I'm Devyn, a life coach.
I'm Meg, a death doula, and this podcast is what happens when a life coach and a death doula walk into a bar.
Honest conversations about grief, joy, and who gets your mother's pearl earrings. Nothing is off limits.
And it all goes back to death. Hi.
Hi. Oh, we're matching and we didn't even realize it.
Yeah, look at that. Blue day. How are you?
That's so cute. You know what? I'm hoping our audience resonates with this and doesn't just think I'm being like a whiny baby, but I'm just having one of those days that like nothing could go right unless it were tomorrow.
Really?
I'm over it. Yeah, I'm just over it. I'm okay though, but I just feel like, when you just have one of those days, You're like, there's nothing that's even really that wrong. It's just like one of those days.
Well, it's about to get better because we're together.
Totally. It's true. It does. It really brings a smile to my face to see you.
I know. And we did not talk a lot this week, which I did not like. I missed you. So I don't know. We were both crazy, I guess, but let's not let that happen again. We didn't text enough for me.
I know. And Tuesday came around so quickly, didn't it? Like, I feel we record this on Tuesdays, and I feel like from last Tuesday to this Tuesday, it felt like 24 hours.
Yeah, it was very quick, but we have a lot to talk about. So let's get started.
Let's
talk about, because I love to start about with pop culture and TV shows or books and how relatable they are to death. And right now the hot show on Peacock is the 5-Star Weekend with Jenny Gardner. Did you watch it?
Of course.
Yeah.
I watch all the hottest shows.
Of course you do. And then you text me and tell me to watch them. So duh. But so today, it's very appropriate because we want to talk about sudden death. And spoiler alert, this show is about sudden death. And she was great. I thought her acting was really great, brought me to tears, made me laugh, great cast. But I really got hit by two things. One thing she said, one thing her 21-year-old daughter said. And for me, that was the whole gist of the show. And she said to her daughter, "It's my job to not fall apart in front of you." Now, that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I thought, why not? I understand if you have little kids, that's tough because you don't want to freak them out. But you have a 21-year-old daughter who had a sudden loss, who's grieving, and she's trying so hard to hold it together and put it aside and be good and go on because she thinks that will help her daughter. But in response, Caroline, I think her name is, says, she can't be real with me, so it makes me feel like I can't be real with her. So in this grief, they don't come together. They're very, very apart. And to me, that was the whole show.
Yeah. It's funny because I've been thinking about this a lot this week in a different context. But when you're around someone who is insecure, for example, the natural thing would be that you would think you'd feel more secure being around someone who is insecure because it's just like, oh, I'm not riddled with whatever that thought is or whatever that might be. But when it really comes down to it, when you're around somebody who is secure in themselves, it gives you permission to be secure in yourself. The same goes with honesty. The same goes with a myriad of other things. But it's interesting because when she said that, it's funny that you brought those up because, again, we haven't talked about this, but it was kind of the central theme that I was thinking about also was this girl is begging to have a more honest, deep relationship, real conversations, real feelings with her mother. And instead of just kind of letting things fall apart so that they could both build them back up together, which I think is what is probably most helpful in grief, especially when it's in a family dynamic, that she was so adamant about being perfect. And it was her perfection that was her demise. And in thinking that I can keep all this together, I don't have to, show my emotions, or that it's not okay to cry, or whatever the messaging that was running through her head was, which I think a lot of women, especially women who are strong or who feel that that's part of their identity, is to be strong or to keep a house together or to be matriarchal in a lot of ways, feel that they can't let their guard down or that they can't be vulnerable about the process of grieving and death. And the magic and the power and the healing oftentimes comes from exactly that. When you do let your guard down and say, I'm having a really hard time and I want to talk about it.
Like you just did, telling us about your day, right? Being real,
Right.
being vulnerable. And I think you nailed it when you said about being secure, because I think one of the things I really want to talk about is with sudden death. I believe that if you feel secure in the relationship with the person that dies suddenly, that has a profound impact on your grieving. Now, she did not have a secure relationship with her husband who died suddenly, which is maybe why her grieving showed up that way.
Yeah. And I think it's also when you don't have a secure relationship with someone, and that could mean anything, right? It could mean you're estranged. It could mean that you're in an argument. It could mean anything. When it comes to sudden death, like it's all bets are off. You could end on any note. And I think that what we sometimes forget, and that I talk to my clients about a lot, is that we don't have to choose between one feeling or another, right? Things can exist at the same time. And so I think in that, and part of what was probably hard for her in that, was processing not just the grief, but also some anger, maybe some resentment, unanswered questions. So, trying to do all of those things simultaneously, we think that we just have to kind of package it up into this little box and say, this is grief and this goes right here. But in reality, we're feeling many different things at all moments in time. And when you process sudden death, I think, especially the feelings of that relationship, if you didn't know that that person was going to die and that you had loose ends to tie up, or you had a conversation that you were waiting to have, or you were estranged, whatever that means, in your relationship, that it is hard to not simultaneously process that part of things. And I think we saw her do that. And I actually felt like there was so much closure in her accepting those feelings about herself, that she was angry or that she was imperfect, because sometimes that's part of it too. I feel badly or I feel guilty that I'm feeling these things towards a person who has just died. I shouldn't be feeling X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. And it's funny. So let's come back to estrangement because that's on my list too to talk to you about with sudden death. But I feel like having the secure relationships are the two examples of sudden death that I have. And because I had those two examples, maybe a trauma response that I have is to overcompensate, but I'm constantly thinking about where my relationships are, constantly, because the two sudden deaths that I had, they were in a good place. And I'm so thankful. And that helped my grief. But yeah, you have fights, you have bad days, you have estrangements. Like, it's really hard to live the perfect relationship, but having that in the back of your mind with the relationships that you value the most is such a nice reminder to live like you're dying, as they say, right? Like, just always let the people know that you love them and be vulnerable and be honest. And when you're
Yeah.
secure with that, it'll, God forbid it happen, it's a better grieving process.
Yeah. And I think that, it's hard because we want people to be authentic, as well as to think of possible worst case scenario. If this ever happened, would I want to be, in a fight with my sister, for example, right? Like, we have such a close relationship, but there are moments where I'm like, oh my God, you're the most annoying person on planet Earth, and I don't want to talk to you for the next 2 hours. And she feels the same way about me. And I can't, in my life, I cannot live my life assuming that the worst thing is going to happen, but I can do my best to pick and choose my battles. That's how I feel. I feel like the stupid stuff is not worth the argument. And sometimes the big stuff is not worth the argument either. But life, in my opinion, is about saying what you mean and meaning what you say and dealing with whatever consequences come from that. And I don't mean go around and tell every single person what you think about them and, what they need to be doing better or that they're not doing the right way or whatever that means. But really have integrity about the way that you feel about a certain situation and speaking about that in a way that feels not hurtful, but clear is empowering in its own right. And it usually doesn't damage relationships that are good in the way that you think it might. So, like these hard conversations that people avoid, for example, I think are usually the conversations that would actually get relationships to the other side of things and also help you kind of filter in and out who is, in my core group of people that I surround myself with, or who is willing to look at this situation from a different perspective and work through it with me. But I think that having hard conversations is not does not fall under the guise of I want to have a happy copacetic relationship, right? Because we have to be able to be authentic to ourselves and be authentic to whatever's going on in our relationships without thinking that the next moment is going to be awful, but also while realizing that time is fleeting, time is precious, your relationships with people are precious. And in that, knowing that we want to have difficult conversations or have fights, arguments, like I think that it's healthy to argue and to
Respectfully.
have moments of, yeah, just back and forth, but really picking what things feel important to you. I'm not a bickerer. I do not want to bicker all day with someone. I don't want to have small little one-off fights. But if I have a real opinion about something, you're probably going to hear about it. And I would feel good about that in my mind of I was true to myself, true to the relationship, authentic to the conversation. So I say this all because I want it to be realistic human emotions. And like you said, maybe part of your trauma is overcompensating a bit and maybe glossing over some of the things that you haven't wanted to say or haven't wanted to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just I think that this is a common thing where people find themselves in a position where I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to say this, or God forbid something happened. And I just want everything to be copacetic. But then you really hold a lot inside that doesn't feel good to you. And again, not saying that this is your exact situation, but I know just from my clients and from, talking to other people that happens often. So picking and choosing your battles, I think, is probably the baseline moral of the story, and being authentic to yourself without being detrimental to a relationship and having the hard conversations because it's okay to have a hard conversation.
Yeah, I love that. All right. So, as a life coach, I have trauma, what do we call them? Trauma responses.
Mhm.
So, and you just kind of touched on it before. You said, without thinking all the time that something bad's going to happen. So, I live my life thinking something bad's going to happen. And I don't want to live like that anymore. And I've gotten better since I've become a death doula. But
Mhm.
my first sudden death in my family was my cousin Michael. And we were 23 years old and we were very, very close. And the night before he went to Europe, he called me to say goodbye, tell me about his trip. He was going to be with some family, then he was going to be with some friends, and then he was going to go off on his own. And it just sounded great. And we ended the conversation with, I love you, which I'm very thankful. And off he went. And so he was on the part of the trip where he was by himself. So he was just meeting new people. And they were at some mountain in Switzerland. And they all took a gondola up to the top of the mountain. Now, the night before, I guess there had been some frost or something, and they didn't know it. So everybody went down the gondola, but he and this boy he had met from Australia decided to walk down the mountain, and they both fell. And he fell to his death, and the boy from Australia caught his leg on a rock and was saved. So, unfortunately for my children, that's all I think about when they do crazy activities. And they are crazy, and they say it's not fun unless you sign a waiver. That's their idea of fun, is risky, crazy, drop out of airplanes, swim with sharks. They're nuts. And I'm so I'm getting better. Like I remember when my two oldest were 12 and 13, they were going to France with my father to visit. My sister has a house there. And I couldn't believe these two little kids were getting on an airplane. I thought they were going to die. And I ran into this teacher in the produce section, and she said to me, "Don't let them see your fear." I said, "Okay." So I didn't. And I went home and I bottled it and I pushed it down. And I was glad I did that. And I still have to tell myself that. But my son Michael said to me, "Mom, how come every time we tell you we're doing something, you just go there? You think like the worst is going to happen?" And I say, "Because it did. How can I stop doing that? I want to be better about it. I've been working on it for 37 years, but I want to continue to work on it."
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, that is valid. I mean, the fact that something did happen and the fact that you did have to get that phone call and the fact that it was something, to your point, that was somewhat adventurous, or that it was, something outside of what their norm and their regular schedule would have been, that I think it would be difficult to say, okay, yeah, don't think about that ever again. Snap your fingers and it's over. That's probably not going to happen. But what I do think that gets easier over time is making space for the evidence that that happens so much less frequently than good things happen, fun things happen, great memories happen. So, like when I'm talking to my clients, a lot of what we talk about is finding evidence in their lives for whatever they're feeling, right? If you're feeling really outrageously afraid of something, where does that come from? But also, how many times have you seen it? Because we have these traumatic incidents that stick out in our minds and live there forever. Absolutely. And I think, again, part of it is just acknowledging that, like, whoa, that really fucked me up. And that really made me feel all of these different things: scared, uncomfortable, grieving for the first time, also at a young age, so that alters your brain chemistry and there's no real getting that back. But I think that now, 23 to 60, how many other times, right, has that been a situation that's happened? And we do have to, just because we have a primitive brain still, right? It's like when you have a panic attack, you have to literally tell your body, I'm not being chased by a lion or a tiger. That's not what's happening right now. And a lot of times, like movement in that way, just again, because we have a primitive brain, to walk away from a situation is what gets us to calm down, because we feel like, okay, we're moving away from the threat or moving away from the fear. But we have to tell ourselves more often than we probably would like to that this is a situation that doesn't require that level of emotion. Not because it's not real, not because it didn't happen, not because it wasn't devastating and you don't want it to happen again, but just because it doesn't happen often enough to evoke this understanding of this emotion, needs to exist in this place. And also, another thing that I say to my clients a lot is like, how many times are you willing to emotionally experience the same thing, right? Let's just say the worst case scenario did happen. You've experienced it however many times in your head before it actually happens. So creating space and distance between the experience and the reality, I think, is the easiest way to sort of put it. And I know way easier said than done. And half of the battle is just recognizing it, like you are saying, I want to be better at this. I recognize that this is my response. I think that that's sort of like what they say in AA. It's like the first step is admitting that there's a problem. The first step is recognizing that this is what's going on, but then realizing that the emotional response maybe is not worth, this exact response in this scenario. And also, God forbid that it is, how many times you're going to experience that is directly based on how many times you experience it in real life and in your head. So living it over and over and over again, instead of just saying, okay, in my experience and the evidence of my life, these are one off, really small chance of it happening things that have been bad. Where do I want to put my emotional, just conscious around this? How do I want to behave in a way that feels like I want my kids to have fun, I want them to enjoy, and best case scenario, it's a great memory and it's laughter and it's fun, and that has happened more times. So I'm going to focus my energy more on that. And I think lastly, if you have time to overthink the worst case scenario, you must make the same time to overthink the best case scenario. It's just sort of like the balance of life, because it's in your head, and it's not to say it's not real. I don't mean it's in your head like move on, get over it, it's we're living in real life. I mean, like, you are thinking about this and ruminating on this, and so you deserve to give yourself a fair chance to think about and ruminate on all of the other things that can happen also, 90% of which are, this is going to be such a fun memory. These are going to be such great pictures. Wow, I can't wait until we're sitting around a dinner table telling their kids about what they did, even if it was crazy and adventurous. So those would be
So
my three things.
somebody did say to me once, why worry about something until it happens? Because then when it happens, you'll worry about it again. So you'll have worried twice. And I do
Right.
subscribe to that. I do like that. And we're going to go away on a family trip and we're doing lots of crazy activities. So I'm going to plug in everything that you just said to me. And I'll tell you when I get back. And I hope to release my fear and not show my fear, and then actually help me to be present, to enjoy the moment and really remember how great it is instead of projecting this fear of something that didn't happen. Okay.
Yeah.
I got my
And I think
homework.
that part of that is good homework, but part of it too is not beating yourself up for having those thoughts. I mean, part of what, again, with just this primitive brain that we all have, is it's keeping you safe, right? These tactics and these tools and anything that we've kind of outgrown, or that we feel like this is my old make, I've been upgraded since then. At one point in time served a really important purpose. And so recognizing that in yourself and not beating yourself up when you do go to that thought, and instead just rerouting. Like, it is that simple. It's the same thing as, oh shit, I turned onto the wrong street and my navigation's rerouting me to that, next street that I was supposed to turn on. Just going with the directions instead of pulling the car over, slamming on the, horn, being upset, whatever it is, beating yourself up. I think that it's just a reroute, and that can be, or a reframe, however you want to think about it. But it doesn't have to be something that feels like, oh, I'm doing it again or anything like that. Just like, this makes sense that I'm feeling this way. And in order to feel a different way, I have to have a different thought. So what's my next thought?
Yeah.
And go from there.
So it's funny because my other sudden death story, I kind of have a sense of humor about my trauma, um, because it's more towards the trauma responses towards my husband versus my kids. But so my brother, when he was 31, he developed, he had a cold or a flu or whatever, and it attacked a virus, and it attacked his heart. And he was 31, and he was living in Europe. He was living in Paris, and with his girlfriend. She's from Belgium, and so they came home for Christmas. And he was better. He was going to a cardiologist, and everything was getting better. And I had a engagement party for them on December 26th, and they were flying back on December 27th, and they were to be married May 20th. And he had a sudden and massive heart attack on January 1st. Now, again, before he left my house on December 26th, he gave me the biggest hug I've ever had from him. I love you. All good. Relationship secure. That helped me so much. But, fast forward, devastating. I really did learn then with sudden death, all you want to do is die and just go away. But your heart keeps beating, the blood keeps pumping, your eyes keep blinking, you keep living, your body keeps living, but your heart is dead. And so, sudden loss is just really hard. And the trauma responses and moving forward, the fear of sudden death. And so fast forward, this was 1995, 2026 now. So still to this day, I catch myself. My husband works out of the house and I hear him talking all day long. And when it goes quiet, I say, oh, this is it. It happened. And I go and I like peek in to make sure that he didn't have a heart attack. And I know it's crazy,
But I
but
get
that's my
that.
trauma
I mean,
response, you know?
yeah, and I don't think it's crazy. I mean, this is part of sort of that last piece of things. Like, I think that we have been taught for whatever reason, I don't know where the wires got crossed on this, but that like grief is this thing that happens once and then it's just like gone and it's over and you move on. And I just think that from all of the conversations that we've had, from all the conversations I've had with anybody else who grieves, the conversations that we have even on threads, everybody's like, you're never the same. It just never goes away. Grief never goes away. It just takes different shapes. It moves in different ways. And that's the shape that it's taken in your life now. And again, I don't think it's about not ever feeling that again or not ever having that sense. But for your own peace of mind, again, recognizing that like the experiencing it over and over and over again. I mean, have you ever done any sort of like somatic therapy or anything?
What is that?
Okay, this is what I think. I'm gonna I'm gonna make you do somatic therapy. Um, it's basically like body work, like any sort of like Reiki, or it's really called like somatic therapy, but it
Mhm.
falls under, the umbrella of anything that has to do with like energetic body work. Because yeah, and I don't know if you've read like The Body Keeps the Score. I know that that was a controversial book, but it really got down to a very simple and concise point, which is that your body inherently, just everything in it, the fascia, your bones, your heart, your blood, everything remembers everything. And where you store this fear and where like I wonder if you feel it like in your own chest, or if you feel it like in your neck, if it's tension, like however you feel this fear. Somatic therapy is basically taking years of all the stuff that you've suppressed and built up in your body. And especially when you're saying like, and I try to keep it together for my kids, and I don't want them to see my fear. Anything that you have held in still probably exists in whatever form it exists in within your body. And it's now become kind of the comfort zone for your body in a lot of ways. Okay, we just go back to this thought. So and it is mental, but it's also really physical. And I think grief is really physical, in a lot of ways, when you're talking about just the physicality of my heart is still going, and but it feels dead, and my body is still moving, but I don't want to be here. There's a physical response of exhaustion and tension and stress and so many things that accompany grief that so many of us don't ever work out of our systems, that it becomes sort of like the default programming.
It's funny, I did go to a healer. I don't know what kind of healer it was, but it was not cheap. And
Mm.
I went and he did all the stuff he does. And he said to me the same thing that my brother said to me in a dream right before my father died. And I felt so much lighter. And then when I got up to leave and I went to the reception area, I was so dizzy. It was like it was coming out of me. I had to sit down.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying. It's true. It does live in there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that is kind of somatic work. Like I've had Reiki done a couple times, and like I'll have a migraine for 2 days afterwards. Like my body, and it's not because I did anything. It's just because your body processes things in such a rapid way when you start to do, things like somatic healing that have been suppressed and sitting there. And again, I was having a conversation with, actually, and I just used this in a client call today. I was having a conversation with a retired Navy SEAL, and he basically said, we default to our highest level of training. And so I was thinking about that just as a metaphor in life, right? Whatever your highest level of training, whatever level that you are at in anything, grieving, feelings, bad habits from the past, whatever it is, that when anything negative or bad or rocky happens and the foundation is shaken, you just go to that level of training, like wherever you're at in that moment. And so I think that that's, what our bodies do and what our minds do is just go back to the default. Oh, okay, I'm scared of this. So go back to exactly how you feel in that moment, on that day, feeling this way, the fear, and 15 seconds, you hear them start talking again and it's different, but your body and your mind relive that exact same process. So to kind of move through that in a different way. I feel like that's why things like therapy, things like somatic healing, things like life coaching, whatever it is that helps you process some of these thoughts and feelings are so helpful, because it just brings you to a higher level of training per se, right? So that your immediate default is not, oh, he's dead. Your default can be like, maybe he's still alive. It doesn't have to be perfect. But I do think that there is something to be said about processing things in a way that actually feels cathartic and real, and that, isn't just, okay, check the box, it's been X amount of years, and so I shouldn't feel a certain way anymore.
Right. I can't say enough about grief counseling too. I went to grief counseling twice, and wow, everything you're saying is like it put things in places for me. So I didn't have to continue to go to the place that made me crazy. It just put relationships and people and feelings into the light, and I could see them. It was really amazing. So I'm a big believer in grief counseling for sure.
Yeah, I know a couple people who need some grief counseling.
Well, hopefully they'll
And
watch
I
this and then go.
Yeah, well, it's so funny, and even with things like somatic therapy, like now somatic just energy healing in general has gotten to a place where it's a little bit more mainstream. Same with therapy, right? Millennials in particular really brought therapy to light and said everyone needs a therapist, and now it's like people are probably over therapized, but whatever works for everyone. Um but when you say things like you should go see a grief counselor, I think people immediately feel defensive, like, "Oh, I'm not doing this the right way," or, "Oh, I need someone else to tell me how to grieve," instead of really just, this is a space for you to have any conversation you want with an objective person who all they care about is helping you, helping your journey, making you feel better, and hopefully making you feel a little bit lighter when you walk out of here. But I've had a lot of people respond when I say things like, have you been to therapy? Have you been to somatic therapy? Have you done Reiki? Have you been to grief counseling? Feel, I think, defensive at
Mm.
first and saying, like, well, I should be able to do this by myself. Um, which is interesting because it is so helpful.
It is, and sudden death in particular is very lonely. And
Mhm.
grief counseling made me feel like somebody was helping me carry the load. I didn't feel so lonely when I went.
Yeah.
So I loved it. And I didn't go forever. I think I went once for a month, and then once I went for 6 weeks or whenever it was that I felt I could carry the load myself moving forward.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
really good. I wanted to go and talk about estrangement. I have estrangement in my family. But most people I know have somebody's estranged, whether it's a cousin or an aunt or a this or a that. And I'm starting to think a lot about estrangement and end of life. And I don't think there's obviously one answer because every relationship is different. And I think whatever people choose is okay. I think the point of me bringing it up is getting people to think about their choice, to really think about their choice, right? Like I have a friend who did not go to her father's bedside or mass. She was able to do different things. And I think it was a great decision because it wouldn't have been good for her. It would have taken too much energy away from other relationships. It was the right call. And I don't want people to think that I would say, oh, you have to go if somebody's dying. You don't. You have to know the space that you're in and where you want to be and what your lane is. But I just think people need to think about it, right?
Yeah, I think, the reality is that it's very hard to watch other people make decisions in their life that we maybe either don't agree with or think that, I mean, the collective we, right? You're talking about your sibling or your, children or whatever, whoever it is, um, make decisions that you feel like are decisions they'll regret, mistakes that are going to have consequences, conversations that are not going to end well, whatever it is, it's very easy to want to save people from that. And also to say, I've made these mistakes, so you don't have to. But the only reason that any of us know anything is because we've made the decisions we've made, because we've made the mistakes that we've made. And I think that when it comes to things like estrangement, that whether it's the right decision or the wrong decision is so personal, first of all,
Mhm.
but also let's just say that you do have a sudden death with an estranged person in your life
Mhm.
and you're left on the other side reeling about how that was the wrong mistake. That's something that you have to make work for you. That's part of your journey. And so, while I think that, yes, it's very important to have real conversations and back to kind of people being over therapized, I do think that a lot of people have sort of mistaken boundaries with estrangement in a way. And there are some people where I have, met people in their lives who they then become estranged from. And I'm like, I get it. That was a really hard relationship for you. Like that did
Exactly.
not work for you. But I think that, it's hard to not want people to feel like, oh my God, that was a mistake. If someone has sudden death, trauma, or if that you feel like, oh, I don't want someone else to go through this in a different way, right? You saying, I had such a good relationship with these two people who suddenly passed that it made my grieving process easier for me. I'm sure the bias is then, so I want it to be easier for other people. But
Mhm.
I think that, whatever decision we make as humans has to be the right one because it's how we, right all of our wrongs. Like it's what we choose. It's how we deal with things. It's the lessons that we learn. And do we probably all at some point in time have some regrets? I'm sure. But I think that life is about limiting the amount of regrets that you have. And like your friend, for example, right, doesn't feel like she regrets not being there for her father at the end,
Not at
right?
all.
That's so there are some,
But she thought
things that
about it.
just work out.
Like, she knew what she was gonna do when the moment came. That's the thing. She didn't wait for the moment to come and say, "What do I do? Do I stick to my guns? Do I go?" She knew. She was true to herself because the decision was the right decision. So
Hmm.
when and if it does happen, you've already thought about it. And that's I mean, I've had to think about it. What would I do? I think I have my plan. And it's
Yeah.
just, I think, important to think about what your plan is. And your plan can change, certainly. I guess what I'm saying is, you know, don't be caught off guard once you've made your decision. Think about it and make your decision and stick with it, whatever the decision is. And that will
Yeah.
help with your grieving.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point is like having a plan in place, something that you if you are given, decisions that need to be made, and like you said, things can change over time if that's what you want. Things evolve, relationships evolve. I've had plenty of clients in, the course of my 6 years of being a coach who say, I'm never talking to that person again. I'm devastated by their actions, all of these things. And then in 6 months, there's a completely different feeling. And we start with feel these feelings now. And if they change, you're allowed that. I think that that's part of it too is the freedom in knowing that you have choice
Mhm.
and that your plans can change and that if you are, given an opportunity, let's just say if somebody is at the end of life, um, that you do what you think in your heart is the right thing to do, not because you're being petty, not because, it's the thing that you want to stick to your guns to, but truly in your heart, authentically, like where you come from as a human, what you think is important to you and follow through on that. And also, just to be fair, right? If your friend did totally regret her decision, she would still be here dealing with the grief in that way. It would be
Right.
different, but it would still be a part of her process. And so
Mm.
I think that, again, every decision is the right decision because it has to be.
Right. Well, this was some good stuff, Devin. I don't know about you, but
I feel good. I feel like we had somatic therapy. I feel totally different. I was going to cancel my date tonight. I think I'm going to
oh, I
go.
want to hear about that tomorrow.
I
You
know.
better text me.
I will. I also just want to say quickly before we leave that after our episode last week, where we talked about just like Swedish death cleaning and the organizational piece of things, that we asked a question on Threads about if anybody has had to clean out, their loved ones' things. And we got so many responses and so many different ways of doing it, so many different circumstances. A lot of people saying that it brought great closure. A lot of people saying that in the midst of it, it was chaos and felt like chaos. And then once it was done, it felt so good and so cathartic. So I think that we really hit a nerve with that episode in a positive way. And, you know, I asked earlier what people who had experienced sudden death wanted us to talk about, and we hit basically all of the points. But one of the things that really stuck out um, was someone said that there are so many unanswered questions. And I just want to ask you, like, in knowing the timeline and obviously knowing surrounding details of what happened to both of your sudden death experiences, um, did you feel like there were unanswered questions or unanswered things, and how did you process that?
1000% with my brother, yes, because it was medical. What the next day was supposed to have a cardiology appointment to see how much damage the virus had done to his heart. And what they would have found is that it was very damaged and he would have had to have a heart transplant. But backing it up, he got the virus, I want to say in October, and he died January 1st. I mean, just medically, I want to know what happened. Medically, I want to know, I mean, the heart attack, what that was like. So I have more medical questions. I don't really have questions about my cousin because it's so chance that it happened and unimaginable. And it's one of those things, it's like a car accident or a shooting or like just bad timing, bad place, bad decision. I don't know. There's nothing that could have changed. But medically, I wonder if something could have changed with my brother.
Yeah. And I think that that's probably difficult just in the sense that if you ever feel like there was something else that could have been done, whether it's medical or even, a lot of people lose people to suicide or addiction, overdose, thinking like I could have done more. But I think that it's also really nice to be able to have a story outside of that with that relationship. And I know that you do. And you have I mean, even the fact that you were able to be in such a celebratory state with him a few days before he passed and have that moment, like, what an amazing thing to be able
It was
to
it was
latch onto in a way
a
and just say,
gift.
like, that is how I last saw him.
Right. That was a gift. And I will say one more thing about for me, and I don't know a lot of people that do this, although I think the Jewish tradition does this, and I think it's super healing, is I named my first boy Thomas after my brother and my second boy Michael after my cousin. And it was so hard to do, but with time, it was so healing. And it keeps their stories alive and it keeps their names alive. And for me, I feel like my kids have a connection. All my kids have a connection with these stories and these people. So
Mhm.
that was healing for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Can you also tell the audience what else you named after someone who passed in your life?
Oh, yeah. So then my dad moved in with us, as and he became the kind of like our family dog because he was this common ball of love, right? We all had to keep an eye on him and we all had to like take care of him. And when I was growing up, my father used to say, when you get your own house someday, you can get a dog. Then I married Kieran and he said, when you get your own house someday, you can get a dog. The dog was a deal breaker. There was never getting a dog in my marriage, which was fine. I never had a dog, so I didn't know what I was missing. So then my dad passed away and I was devastated. We were all devastated. And I started noticing how much people love their animals. Like it was this kind of love that I didn't know about, but I wanted to tap into it. So I said to Kieran, I think we're going to get a dog. And he said, are you going to play the death card? And I said, yeah, I am going to play the death card. And we're going to name him my father's middle name, which was Earl. So I got a cockapoo and we named him Earl. And he healed us. Again, the whole Jewish tradition, right? I think they name somebody after the first letter.
Yeah. And especially middle names now. I
Oh,
think, more modern day, it's middle names, but
yeah.
yeah,
So I just love that tradition and it healed me. So if that can help anybody, go for it.
I love that. I think that's a perfect note to end on. Well, cheers to Earl.
Our beloved Earl passed away September 15th. We'll talk about that at another episode.
We have to talk about death grief, pet grief on another episode. We got to keep this contained.
That's right.
All right. Well, I love you. This is great.
I love you too. And have a great date tonight and text me tomorrow.
Thanks.
Love
Okay,
you.
bye.